for 24th of August 2009. Sorry. Starting with the first item of general business, public comment. Seeing no one, I will close that area and come back to item B, approval of the minutes, ABR of August 10th, 2009. Can I have a motion for that, please?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Paul first. Second by Keith. Okay. Anything before item 1? Item 1. Item 2. Item 3. 4. And that's it. So, no changes. All those in favor of the minutes, say aye. Aye. One abstention. Motion passes. On to consent calendar. Can I have a motion for consent calendar?
So moved.
It's by Keith first.
I'll second.
Second by Paul. Okay. So
start with last Monday, August 17th. Item A, 633 De La Vina Street. Approved as noted of review after final. Landscaping was continued 1 week. Item B, 631 Olive Street. Continued indefinitely. And items were reviewed by Clay Arell and Carol Gross.
okay, great. Is that the only consent? We have.
Today's also.
Okay. So all those in favor of that minute, say aye. Aye. Motion passes. So we have to open it again for the second. So motion for the second consent minutes. First by
I'll first.
Paul. Second by Keith. Okay.
For today's consent agenda, Monday, August 24th, item A, 421 North Milpas Street, approved as submitted of review after final. Item B, 1405 Harborview Drive, final approval as noted. Item C, 2101 Ridge Lane, preliminary approval and continued 1 week. Item D, 633 De La Vina Street, continued 1 week. Items were reviewed by Clay Arell and Carol Gross.
Great. Thanks. All those in favor of the minutes as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. So, close that area of business and bring it back to announcements and requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, etc.
I have just one announcement. Our next meeting in 2 weeks happens to fall on the Labor Day, so we're wanting to confirm attendance to reschedule that meeting for Tuesday, September 8th.
Okay.
We have
Tuesday, September 8th.
an attendance poll. We just want to.
I should be here, yeah. I'll be here, I think.
Thank you.
And, okay. Subcommittee reports? Anyone? No. Having said that, close general business, and we're up for the first item of the evening.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Paul.
One comment. Did staff want to make a comment about that one project that's being constructed at Dakota and Garden Street, is it? Or the blue?
If you want to talk about it.
No, Jaime meant.
I brought it up and it was brought it to Chris's attention.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought that
maybe,
was public knowledge.
well, just public knowledge is what I've been told, and what I gather is that the blue that's on the building right now does not match the approved color that we had, and it was a special mix, and so we're going back to the architect to let him know that we want to stick to the colors that we approved because they are sensitive colors in the very first instance, and we bent a little bit to allow those sensitive colors, and the direction that it's gone in now, away from those approved colors, makes it worse than we'd like. So we're going to stick to what's been approved.
Okay, and just for the record, that was the building at 302 East Haley.
Thanks very much. Okay, come back to item 1 then for the evening. 803 North Milper Street. Hey Don, how are you doing?
Is this face towards you or me?
Yes.
It's exactly the same. And if I could borrow one of those 11 by 17s, that would be great too. Good afternoon. I'm Jarrett Gorin of Vanguard Planning now, representing 803 North Milpa Street LLC, who's the property owner here. And what we're in with today is temporary improvements to the property we own at De La Guerra and Milpa Street. We have another project which you've reviewed before that's going through the approval process. It's actually had its first planning commission on the 20th, and we're going back on October 1st. In the meantime, because of economic conditions, we probably aren't going to charge ahead with building that project upon approval, and we'd like to do something out there with the vacant lot, which is kind of an eyesore, and get it so that we could rent it out to somebody else temporarily. So I had our landscape architect come up with, basically we want to pave the lot so we can rent it out to a car dealership or a nursery or somebody like that, and then provide landscaping to be able to meet the city's BMP requirements for stormwater filtration. So that's what we're in with today is temporary improvements. If we build these, they'll probably only be on the site for 1 or 2 years till the economy approves, and then we would move ahead with building out the actual approved project that we have for that site. So there's not a whole lot to it. It's basically paving the lot and putting in expanded landscape planters on portions of the perimeter and also around the backside of the lot, and retaining existing trees and hopefully doing something to improve the health of those trees, or supplementing them in a couple of cases where the tree is just doing really bad. And then we'd like to get approval for a temporary structure, basically like a temporary sales office type structure, which could be installed anywhere within this envelope, somewhere in the back corner of the site, and then have some landscape plantings around that structure as well, and get some direction on what kind of plantings we would need for that. The 11 by 17, this just shows pictures of the types of structures made by one of the companies that supplies these a lot of times. They have some flexibility on colors and elevations, and we can probably do whatever colors we need. But again, we're not trying to build a permanent building here. We want something which will look decent, and we can put some plantings in around it. But that's probably going to be coming out in a few years, just so that we can get some use out of that lot and avoid the constant graffiti and weeds and everything that we have right now. So that's my presentation. I can answer any questions y'all have about what we're trying to do.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Anyone in the public would like to comment? Seeing no one, bring it back to staff at anything?
We have one letter of opposition from Ms. Paula Westbury in the record.
Great. We'll take some questions from the board. Keith?
Thanks. Chair, in the photographs of the modular building, is this representative of the colors or?
I would look at that more for the actual materials and all in the building. Like I said, we can have that building in any colors. I'm sure they probably have standard ones, and we could probably also paint it any colors that we decide are good colors.
Okay. And could you explain a little bit the permeable AC paving?
My understanding is, and this is coming from my landscape architect, who's Lane Goodkind, who's got a lot of experience with this stuff. there's apparently permeable AC paving out now that you put in on top of a permeable base, so not your standard road base, which packs almost solid. You put this paving on it, it actually does allow water through, and we're able to do that and basically almost meet existing conditions within the paved area. And then we're still going to direct runoff into planters and treat it in infiltration strips and everything else.
And is the appearance just like regular AC paving? It's
My
black.
understanding is it looks like regular AC paving. I don't know if there's coloration options available for it or not.
That's
I would
it.
assume regular AC.
All right. Thank you.
Chair?
Yeah, yes, Gary?
Question for staff. I was under the impression that there's no such thing as a temporary building.
I was going to discuss that with you during this meeting. What we're going to ask as part of, and this is something we're wanting your input in, is in correlation with their development plan project, their other project, to put some sort of time limit on it. We suggested maybe a year, but talk to the applicant, see what's reasonable, and then we can go from there. But we definitely put some sort of time limit on this approval, so it's not a permanent approval.
And I think we would be okay with that because that is our intention. I would ask for 3 years just because that's where we think the economic cycle is, with having to come back before that, if it was going to be any longer than that. But that's what we would ask for.
And also, we discussed that. Staff said we suggest 1 year with the idea that we could do time extensions with a maximum of up to 3 years. But it would be reviewed at a year level for a time extension.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Gary, you wanted to further follow up on that, or?
And the other question is this photograph does not depict the surface material that you're choosing?
My understanding is that does not. I think he's more showing the types of plantings with this. These look like pavers to me, and we're not proposing to do the whole site with pavers.
And are you proposing lighting?
We did not include lighting as part of this proposal, and I'm not anticipating. I would think if somebody wants to come in and put site lighting in, that's going to. If you're talking about the type of area lighting that you would see in a car dealership,
Yes.
that would be outside the scope of what we're talking about here, and somebody would probably have to come back to you if they wanted to do that.
That's a good question.
Thanks, Gary. Don?
You just answered mine.
Okay, Paul?
The only question I had to do with the air conditioning unit, and if it could be, which side does it go on? Could it be roof mounted, or is it? And then the adjacent usage. What's the adjacent properties? And how?
That's a good question. I am imagining that air conditioning unit can probably go on either side of these trailers. I mean, these things are stock, but they probably have an option of which side you can pick it on. And certainly, our preference would be to put it over here, away from the street side of it. In terms of adjacent uses, we own this property next door, and what's on the back here, you can barely see the outline of the existing house type structure that's in the front. There's an industrial building that's on the opposite side of the lot, and this is basically open yard storage area adjacent right here. And then this is a 2-story apartment building, and it's from here back is its parking area. So it's really just a question of is it better off here to stay further away from residential uses, or is it better off here to have it not be as visible? Again, what we were trying to get at, we're proposing an envelope here. Like, it's possible this structure could be installed.
Excuse me. So if you could just answer the question exactly. It's just like going a little too much.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to be thorough.
Yeah.
I believe that there's flexibility on where that can be installed, yes.
Thanks. Chris?
Yeah, I guess there's a question for staff concerning the ingress egress. I'm wondering, first, is there some sort of a setback from the intersection? Isn't it a 50-foot requirement that? I mean, I understand these are existing curb cuts, but is there a setback rule for that?
I'm not sure at this point what the setback is at this point. This is being also reviewed by Pete Lawson, the case planner for the development project, and transportation is looking at that.
Okay.
That's why today it's only comments only.
Okay. So if those are not allowed, they'll catch that. Yeah, I think that's my question for now.
Okay, thanks. I have some questions here. This proposal, temporary improvements to a vacant site with a temporary business office. So are you in the process of applying for a parking sales business on this site?
We would need to come in. This is the first step in the process. The following step would be to go to building department and ask for a building permit to do this structure, and planning would look at what the proposed use was.
Okay, because here's what I'm trying to get at here is that it seems to me this is like a two-part thing here. The fact that you're saying temporary and then you're asking for an office on there, and then regularly we would look at this business and then decide what needs to be on there. So if I knew that this was going to be selling cars, and then we'd have to look at lighting and the way they're going to lay out cars, et cetera, to make recommendations. What I don't want the board to be caught in is that we are approving a business office, and then you go and put the cars there all whichever way you want, and then all you're coming for is like a chain across here and then some lighting poles. And when really we should be looking at it as generally as a whole business, and how that improvement should be done. And I don't want our board to be caught doing this half and half, and then we don't do the right job. And that's why I'm asking about this office that you're asking for in the back of the
We do not have a specific end user in mind right now. What we wanted to do is bring a general concept in front of you, the idea of paving this site and getting some sort of a structure in this location on the site and putting in this landscaping. And if somebody has a specific use which is going to deviate beyond the scope, in other words, parking cars out here, putting in lighting, I think I addressed that before, I would expect they would have to come back here and get that specifically looked at. But having this looked at in advance assists, because when a tenant's looking at the site, if there's nothing that's been looked at, then they have no clue what they're dealing with. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Okay. So I would then entertain some comments from staff. Yeah, Dawn.
I completely understand what the applicant is requesting, and it's very common to not have a tenant and wanting to have what's typically referred to as a vanilla box improvement. So I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the development, but I'd like to defer the landscaping to Chris, or if Carol's coming, to Carol. But the only comment that I have is that when we've had these come before us before, we've requested a little bit of decoration added to them, and especially because we'll be approving it for several years, and just because of the precedent that's been set. So my recommendation would be similar to ones we've made in the past, and that's adding, I think, a trellis structure on the front goes a long way with these, and then it adds some three-dimensionality to the front elevation and provides some shadow and some color with some vine pockets, and that would be my only recommendation.
Okay. Keith?
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with Dawn's comments. Don't really have a problem with the overall, scope or concept, and the addition of some scale elements on it, and then just maybe with a proposal of some other color scheme that's a little nicer than just this kind of beige or white, box. So anyway, yeah, that's it.
Gary?
Yeah, definitely a trellis with some vines and maybe more planting to hide the sides of the trailer. But I was also curious about a trash enclosure, or how trash is going to be handled, and what type of facility they would have in that. And as far as paving it in asphalt or a permeable asphalt goes, I would be more in favor of something that's going to be maybe more like a chip seal or something like that. So I don't know. It's kind of a large field of asphalt. without giving a use to it. It's kind of scary to give a use of a big structure of asphalt that's not striped off for paving, that's not determined what the use would be, and I would be afraid that it might be used for something other than that. And given that the asphalt doesn't have a use right now, I would think that it would need to be something that is easily moved and not quite such a large.
Can I ask a question? I just want to make sure I understand Gary's comment. A chip seal, my understanding is that that's what they put over asphalt and streets, but that's not what you're talking about.
That's not exactly
What is it that you're talking about?
Well, I don't know if I'd prefer this much paving without a use, and I would like to see it. I think pavers that would be removable, or maybe an area that is landscaped and reserved for future use that you can. I would rather see it landscaped, and say you come back and you want to have a sales for autos or something like that, then use that area for sales of auto. But to have it paved without a use right now doesn't make sense to me with the size of the office that you have. I would say that the size of the structure that you have should be equivalent to how much parking you have.
Thanks. That's it. Paul?
All the comments that were said, I agree. I would just add that this is comments only, so when it comes back for preliminary and final, that they note where the air conditioning unit is, that kind of detail. My personal 2 cents is I would suggest landscaping this whole area just to make it ease of traffic at the intersection, because right now we're not used to the cars there, even though there are 4 existing curb cuts, and just get people used to using the 2 far extreme ones. And that is all.
Thanks, Paul. Go to Chris, and then you come back.
I was going to say the same thing. I would consider wrapping that planter on that corner, just because it is a lot of paving, and it'd be nice to screen that as much as possible from the intersection. Also, I'm wondering about possibly screening the office. Maybe I guess I could go up there. Just wondering the possibility of maybe bringing the line out and over like this, so that there's a little more screening from the Milpa side, since it is sort of a temporary structure. So that would be my recommendation. Other than that, I think it looks fine.
Thanks, Chris. Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the general policy to create as much pervious material as possible to allow the water, the natural rain, to recharge the water table, I think should be employed in all projects. So this much paving of a non-pervious material, I think is too extreme.
Does somebody want to clarify this, or shall I?
Oh, is this a pervious material? Oh, I thought, listening to Gary's comment, I thought that he was suggesting more of a pervious material.
No, it's asphalt.
That's
it's asphalt.
impervious.
Yeah.
That's not
and
pervious.
they're talking about the so-called pervious asphalt. But
there is
if you
no
know what,
such thing.
correct.
Right. I'm not aware of an asphaltic material that is pervious.
Well, there is one out there that claims to be pervious. How successful it is still being debated, but that's essentially what they're talking about. And so I get where you're coming from, but so you have to look at it in that light. That it's debated.
Okay, well, then
it's debatable right now.
Then let me make my comment as in order for me to feel comfortable with the material choice that you're recommending, I would want to see a little bit more documentation. And an example that it had been used in Santa Barbara somewhere, so I could really look at it, because I need to be educated on this material, because I'm not aware. If there's different degrees of perviousness, I think we should go to one that is, that really does recharge the water table. I agree with all the comments that I heard, especially the one that, or both of you, I think, had made the comment about increasing the landscaping wherever possible. And I would almost look at that, whoever, did you say that? Or did Paul say that? Is to really scrutinize where is the circulation pattern of the cars, because it may not just be filling in these two areas for landscaping, but maybe making a whole corner. I know the camera can't pick up what I'm saying, but maybe it makes more sense to have this whole corner landscaped if circulation is still
That's what Chris
accessible
said.
inside. So I think just generally the pervious material and more landscaping wherever possible.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Claire, would you like to comment? No? Okay. I agree with them. I think the biggest part for me now is, as this is going to be temporary, I think that what is left there has to be looked at. I would not like to see this total huge area of asphalt just as a temporary nature. So I agree that I'd like it to be as pervious as possible, and I think it would be debatable as to that asphalt that you're talking about. Show us the information, but I have also heard that over time the permeability of that asphalt gets less and less and less after time, and it just becomes normal asphalt. I agree with the others that if this is temporary, this corner here should be landscaped and these areas closed off. I mean, the curb cuts, of course, remain, but I agree that the unit itself the base of it should be screened. We should be looking at a trellis. The color should be very neutral. I think Chris's idea of screening this from the street is a very good one. I think you have to locate the air conditioning equipment and the trash enclosure and screen those. I think that this should be a maximum 1 year time limit that could be renewed by staff. And I think from the moment that there's a business that's being proposed to be here, then I think that it should come back for review. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes, Dawn.
I'd just like to put my 2 cents on the 1 year time limit.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take a year to get this all put in and get the landscaping put in and order the unit and put the
I think staff would take that in
I just
consideration.
I think 1 year is to ask them to build a trellis around it and screen it, and then give them only 1 year. Seems like maybe not enough. But that's just maybe be my opinion.
Okay. All right. I think we have the comments. Thanks, Dawn. I'm open for a motion. Anybody would like to discuss it, any item further? Otherwise, a motion would be.
Mr. Chair, I just want
Paul?
to clarify one thing. The staff's perspective was a 3-year max on the permission of this temporary structure, but it was going to be reviewed in one-year increments. So it was a 1-year approval that can be extended twice for a total of 3 years.
Correct.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion. This is for comments only. Concurring with the staff's suggestion of a 1-year limit with a 3-year max for the improvements on the site. The project, when it comes back to board, should come back to full board for preliminary and then perhaps even final. There should be some trellis element added to the temporary structure. A color board shall be provided. Location of the air conditioning unit shall be shown and shall be screened from public view. The trash location shall be shown and screened from public view. Information about the impervious material shall be brought to the committee. The landscaping at the front corner curb cuts shall be included in the design, and if there's to be some bollards or some type of fencing along the existing curb cut driveway, that should be also a detail shall be brought. And that is all.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Dawn. Under discussion, Paul, did you want to make any comment about the particular landscaping in this corner? And
Not at this point. It's just that there should be landscaping in that area. It's kind of vague, and how much it's based upon the end user. Hopefully, when they come for preliminary, they'll already have a tenant lined up, and so that can be addressed.
Okay, so this would be for comments only, and it would come back to this board for preliminary approval of this temporary proposal.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Under discussion.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
The landscape palette is all grasses, and this selection needs to be trimmed down in wintertime in order to revegetate. So we really don't have a varied palette and no trees. If we're asking for an embellished area of landscaping in the corner, I do think that we should add a comment in a general sense, since we're giving preliminary comments on this palette, is landscape palette shall not be limited to what is shown, but encouraged for more foundation planting and possibly trees. If that's okay
Yeah.
with the maker,
So
whoever that.
this is for comments only. It will come back for preliminary, so this is not preliminary yet. This is for
Right,
comments
but I'm
only.
just-
But your comment is
The reason why I'd like that to be part of the motion is really just to save time for your landscape architect to really come in with a plan that then would be prepared for preliminary approval at that time.
okay. How does that? How the makers?
Actually, I'll just leave the comment the way it is. The applicant heard what you had to say. I understand that the whole site's going to be scraped 100% when they build the new building, so they're not going to want to put a whole bunch of trees unless they put them in boxes and relocate them, and then adds to the complexity unless they can landscape a certain area and then work around it during the course of construction. So I don't think it's very pragmatic for them to plant trees, even though I agree with you. In the long term, this is a short-term solution. The type of grasses, that's something that's out of my league, but I'm hoping he'll take it back to his landscape architect, and when they come back for preliminary, they'll address those concerns
Then
about
could-
needing to be cut down.
Okay, then could we, thank you, then could we say something, because the landscape architect is not present, and he may not be, this would be like, him relaying this, could we say the plant palette is not part of our, we're looking forward to a more sustainable plant palette. I mean,
How about this? Just that and with Don's okay as the seconder, that the landscaping will be addressed in more detail at the next review. And
okay, just something that lets them know that this isn't necessarily approvable at this point.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think that the way you worded it doesn't get across. If they forget what was talked about, which they won't, then it won't be in there that we expect something more than a grass that is going to have to be cut way back in the wintertime.
I'm open. What would you suggest?
I think that Carol's comment is stating that the board would like something. I think what you said is to have the landscape architect study a palette that is
Has more sustainable year-round plantings.
Yeah, something like that.
Not excluding trees.
Okay.
And then I think that when the landscape architect reads that, I think he'll get the idea that
Okay.
he needs
I'm
to
fine
have
with
that.
Do you have that?
Would box trees be, if they're planning on developing in the future, perhaps purchasing of the box trees ahead of time and not planting them?
They could, yeah. They could present that at the next time, but that is also a possibility. Okay, so we have a first and a second. We had discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. Second item of the night, 522 Garden Street.
Do you agree with that?
Public hearing. What? Okay, so we'll adjourn for, let's see how many minutes.
45 minutes.
What? For 25 minutes? What?
You could have spent more time talking about landscape.
Okay, we take a adjourn for a couple of minutes. for the next item, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Here we are at item number 2, 522 Garden Street. State your name for the record.
My name's Ryan Mills.
Great.
And I'm Edward DeVicente, architect.
Thank you.
Okay, this is 522 Garden Street, a tiny little mixed-use project just behind my left shoulder there, 100 yards. Start with the photos. So this bottom middle photo, so this is our proposed site. It's an existing little craftsman home directly to the
South?
north, Art from Scrap, to the north, I'm going to call it north for this case, is our Art from Scrap building, which is property line to that property line.
closer to your mouth?
It's on.
Okay. Okay.
So here's a overall picture of our Art from Scrap neighbor on the corner, and then over here, so on the other side is, you catch the hedge here, is Planned Parenthood property, which here's a picture of that hedge and trellised walkway, and the building itself is pushed quite a distance back beyond our property. This is a garden and coda looking down the street, again at the Art from Scrap in our existing building in the background. This is towards the bottom of the block looking back up, so it just sort of shows you the context, the street canopy. Here is also looking back up the block, and you can see that Art from Scrap wall that's against our property. I mean, you don't really notice it until you get within a couple parcels. Up here is a pano of directly across the street with a couple of the buildings on the corner, and then that existing, I'm not sure what it is, and then a parking lot. And then this is after Art from Scrap, one more south, sort of a warehouse-looking building and parking lot.
Okay.
What we noticed was there's actually a lot more service yards and whatnot in this block. It's kind of one of those funny blocks you don't really notice too much, but as far as location and proximity to the freeway in downtown, we think it's going to be a transitional neighborhood and a good spot for a project like this. Let's see. So here's the context. Here's our Art from Scrap neighbor on the property lines. There's a parking lot here, a building, another neighbor here, and then this is another property line neighbor that's about 15 or 16 feet high, which we'll see in elevation. This is the existing hedge along Planned Parenthood that we are proposing to keep intact. And then, of course, Garden Street, in which, different times of the day has a little bit of noise and traffic to it. So when we kind of looked at all these opportunities and constraints, it sort of started to make sense to gravitate towards our Art from Scrap neighbor. It's sort of that big blank wall. And by moving this direction, it does a couple things. It allows a lot more openness. I mean, these are semi-permanent, I assume. This project's not going anywhere. So it kind of created a lot more openness, and we kind of shoved up against this neighbor. And also the views we're looking for is, here's the Riviera, and this looking south is potential ocean and island views for us. So moving down to the street, our little separate commercial unit, we pulled back just a little bit to provide for landscape along the front. And over here is a covered outdoor entry for our unit. So it provides one place for like an urban entry for the resident, little entry lobby for him that attaches to his private garage, a little bit of storage, and then straight up to his unit. The other reason we kind of moved this way with the project is to allow for parking. Parking was a slight challenge for this site. It really wanted to be center aisled and kind of doubled up this way, but we couldn't quite do center. We wanted to nudge as close as we could to provide private parking, private garage, and then the required commercial. And this we found was sort of the new minimum. If you're going to have one parking spot, it looks like this. Now we have the parking and accessible with its loading. And then in the front corner is our trash and recycling. We wanted to pull away from the units, and then required open space and ADA access down to the sidewalk and into the front. And then so we're making it. Thanks, Paul. We're proposing a new curb cut. The old one is, I think, just in the middle. So we're moving this, and we haven't gotten there yet, but at least probably proposing a new street tree. I assume this tree would be pretty challenging to relocate, but either or, we plan to move it. And potentially more. We haven't got a landscape architect on board yet.
Great.
So as we move up, I'll just start from here. So the residence, we circulate up the stairs into a living room, a nice open volume living room that breaks out onto a patio over the kind of half of the commercial space. And then we circulate back to 2 bedrooms. One of the smaller is first, and then a larger master bedroom. Our wet core, this is that solid property wall, so we kind of use that to fur out, and we're going to do all of our plumbing back here. We have our wet core all in one place, and something unique here is we're opening up to the bedroom as much as we could. The challenge for these in the back were natural lighting, so we're opening up to the master and then creating a large light well or small atrium to come down 2 stories into that space in between the bathrooms. And then circulate up to the 3rd story. This is the great room, so this is where he's cooking, eating, probably spending most of the time. Towards the east here was our greatest view opportunity. It's a spectacular Riviera view, so we want to kind of frame this one the most, and one of the client's desires was a great outdoor entertainment space, so we oriented the view this way. And then here towards the south we have a secondary, kind of a framed opening. So we believe, we haven't been up that high yet, but we believe we're going to get pretty close to catching like an East Beach view. Around the 2nd floor we're catching all the tops of the palm trees down there on Cabrillo, so we're hoping for the best up here. And then, let's see. So our design inspiration, it really started with its location. We were kind of looking for a transition piece. We were torn between the downtown EPV and classic Spanish architecture with some of the projects down in the light industrial or funk zone. So we kind of looked for something that would transition really well in between. So we kind of came up with a more or less a contemporary composition with really familiar or traditional materials for our town. So we broke up the mass with 3 small boxes. The ground floor being that commercial unit, we picture really familiar. This is soft plaster. It's not really clean. A storefront that's a classic Santa Barbara storefront. And then the second mass is a little more playful, a little light. So we skinned it with wood, and it transitions to kind of transparent wood at the rail. And then the third, we go back to plaster, but it's pushed back from the street and kind of grows out of the center of the project. Just for context, here's our art from scrap. Is at our finished floor on that second, and then that existing building in the back on the property line is just about the same height as our first level, and this is that hedge. This elevation, this is the parking lot elevation. Again, ground floor, here's that commercial material palette. We have simple industrial garage door closed off. Here's the wood box. And the wood box is sort of shifted lightly. It cantilevers just a little bit off the front. And then it also 2 or 2.5 feet over the garage. Patio, this is the large patio in the back. We broke that down just to open that view. Here's the front patio looking to the TV Hill area. And then this is that second framed view. This was just sort of a fun component. It's almost like a cuff. We're facing south. We have a framed view, and we were playing with ideas to shade it a little bit. So we kind of let the plaster kind of grow out and create a little chamber. Should stick out. It's in the distance here.
Okay.
You'll see it in perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's 15, 20 feet back from this side. So that's what this little element's about. The chamfers are something we played with. We have them for a couple reasons. One was just to play on this classic material. I wanted the plaster to feel soft, so it's sort of a play on that soft cornered or hand modeled look. And also, it actually creates a lot of movement as you pass by this building. Instead of like 3 stacked boxes, well, let's look at the perspective.
Before you go to the other page, it's showing this chamfer going all the way to the end, but then you're seeing this one in the background. I'm not understanding how that works.
This is the same one.
Yeah.
It's at a 45 degrees, so it looks the same from both elevations.
Oh, it's just a small chamfer at the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. This will help describe it. So what it did was we kind of took a relatively simple, like these 3 boxes that are stacked, and by chamfering those 2 corners, I just liked how it created movement. So as you came around the front, it really makes this cascading movement down, which is sort of nice, which feels a lot different from this corner. You sort of sense the stacked boxes of it. And the other 2 elevations. This is our art from scrap building. So if we were floating above that, you could see our 3rd story and parapet wall peeking about halfway over. There's our finished floor. And then this is in the back of the property. The grade is actually down here. This is the existing building on the other side. This is the height of a wall, existing wall that's built on the other property. This is art from scrap. So we'll see the 2nd story of our project is, and we're showing it in block. We're building these 2 this back corner in block. We could be plastering this. We just hadn't decided that yet. And this wall is actually the same block, CMU block, as well as this building. And then here's our 3rd story staring at the Riviera view. There's a section. Sections, kind of showing the volumes. This is east-west section. Just behind here's our garage. This is that storage unit. This is the commercial unit. And then up above, this is the living room, 2 bedrooms. And then you can see how we set back the 3rd story volume from the street. And then this is the Riviera view. And then this is north-south. Turn around upside down, looking long ways through that entertainment space, that great room, living rooms, bedrooms, and commercial. Or that's the garage floor. And I believe that's it. We're looking forward to your comments.
Thanks. So I'll just open it up to the public for any comments. Seeing no one, I'll close that, bring it back to staff.
We have 1 letter in opposition from Ms. Paula Westbury.
Thanks very much. Then bring it back to the board for questions. Keith? Gary?
Yeah, no question.
Don? Paul?
Do you happen to know the size of the street tree that's being proposed to be removed?
Beyond the photograph we have, no.
Can you approximate it? 8, 12, 24?
I'm going to 12, I'm thinking. Let's see, where's our photo? Let's get close.
Is it that?
Here it is. Or maybe it's larger. Yeah.
16.
Liquid amber?
I'm not sure what that is.
It has those little pink flowers on it. A little tuberous.
This might be the... Okay. Clay? Carol? Chris? Okay, just one question. This here is the hedge you're talking about between
Yes.
the 2 properties. Is that a wall with ivy on it?
Yeah, is it? It's
Or is that hedge?
it's
A
about
foliage?
an 18-inch CMU wall with a wood fence that's buried in the middle there.
Oh,
It's
okay.
growing.
And it's ivy, and the ivy grows around on the other side?
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
been
it's
growing
pretty.
up both sides.
Yeah, it's pretty
Great.
full on both sides.
And that's on their property here?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Comments from the board. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comment on the site planning first. I understand the reasoning for justifying things up against the blind wall of the art for scrap. I think there's logic there. I think it's really unfortunate to with a brand new project to not be able to plant it around that existing street tree because that's a pretty large mature tree. So I think that's kind of a kind of a deal killer for me to have to, that you can't plan around that. So I would encourage you to try to keep that. Kind of questioning the placement of the open space right on the street. It doesn't seem like it would be very usable for the residents because you'd just be out there in the public. There's no real kind of transition to a more private, usable open space. So that, in my mind, is kind of more decorative and ornamental than actually usable. And then also, I think having the trash enclosure there is unfortunate. I would look to see some integration into the building side so that it's more discreet and possibly opens up some more open space. Architecturally, mass, bulk, and scale, I understand the concept with the interlocking kind of forms. I would look maybe to study the middle form stepping back rather than coming out, just because I think that starts to sort of exaggerate the mass, bulk, and scale, having that cantilever towards the sidewalk. I like the clear distinction between the volumes with the different materials and the mix of materials. I like that. Not too turned on by the chamfer on the plaster volumes. I mean, somehow everything else is a pretty straightforward, pure form, and I don't know. In my mind, that starts to kind of dilute that, although it does kind of cut the mass back. And then also, seems like the place for the open rail might be at the street to minimize the mass of the volume at the street, and cutting away the volume here. It's to the back property line, so it's not really visible. I think cutting into your kind of pure volume sort of dilutes the clarity of the different forms. So architecturally, that doesn't really kind of work for me all that much. I think that's it. I think the bigger concerns are some of the site planning issues that I touched on. I think the architecture with some refinements that direction, I could see working there. So those are it.
Thanks, Keith. Gary?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would echo about the tree. I have real concerns about the existing street tree. I think that it's a real nice tree. It has a nice flower on it, and I think it's one of those little city jewels, actually. So I really would challenge the architect to try and use a different entry approach. I'm not real wild about the chamfers, but I'm not real wild about this style in general, so I'm just not going to comment. I'm not opposed to it. I think this is a good area for this style of architecture. I think it has some simple forms, and I would agree with Keith on the railing to cut down the massing in the front. And the one thing that I've noticed on it was in the renderings we have a lot of plants and foliage that is spilling around the sides of it. But when I look at the floor plans, it doesn't equal to what the planter space is. So if we are going to have this illusion of plant growing over the side, I would make sure that we have the proper containers that could handle that type of foliage. That's about it.
Thanks, Gary. Dawn?
Excuse me. I like it. I like this project, and I'm very comfortable with the mass, bulk, and scale. But I think, Ryan, you could probably get this tree to work. and still not screw up your
Right.
parking and your two-sided parking situation. And I don't think this is a bad place for the open space, considering how you've laid everything out. But I think that a solution to the usability of it would be to screen it from the street. I mean, it's not a lot of public traffic that's walking up and down here that needs to have the benefit of seeing this open space, and it's kind of a compound anyway. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing some type of a privacy wall here, and kind of look in and see, but not being able to see in this corner and still, having some screening. But I like it. I tend to agree with Keith's comment about breaking up that mass with that lowering of the railing wall, but even more so because I think that you may want a little privacy. But then again, it isn't about. So that's neither here nor there with me. I like it. And the chamfer doesn't bother me. I think it's different, and it's a personal preference, and it's kind of unique.
Thanks, Don. Paul?
I'll just jump to first. I do like the way it looks and the playfulness. Like Don said, it's a personal style. What I noticed was that this chamfer and this chamfer weren't the same, and perhaps if you took the smaller one up to the top, then this will more read similarity-wise, because that might be what's picking up some people. But I do like the chamfer look. Concern that I have with the site planning layout is I don't know how often the pedestrian entrance is going to be utilized.
Right.
And if anything, bums are going to start sleeping there, and you're going to have trash, and the owner's never going to use that space. So if there was any way of taking this door and incorporating it into the same alcove that's happening here, the business owner is going to sweep this alcove. The owner may never use the door that goes up to the residential area, but that was just a possibility of correcting something that could become a menace to the owner. And then the last statement is just a little bit on the weird side, that I don't think this site is maxed out well enough. I mean, there's too much open space left over, and I keep on thinking, what's wrong here? Because you don't need this open space on the lower level if you have all these decks here, because those decks should count as your...
Well, we were kind of forced.
You were forced to do it, so whatever. You're providing a lot of open space,
right.
But I'm looking at it going, all right.
Thanks, Clay.
Mr. Chair, I like the direction of the project. I think it's a good first swing at it. I share a lot of the same comments that Keith brought up. I think for me, I'm on the other, I don't know where I'm at with the chamfer. My first response was, really? And then, I was kind of looking at it. I think it looks really great from the northwest perspective, and then from the southwest perspective, or south coming up the street. It doesn't do it for me. So I'm kind of conflicted by it. It's not a deal killer by any stretch for me personally, but I'll just leave it at that. I agree about the issue with the tree. I know you're constrained on access. I understand the issues that you're having with making parking work and getting in. But if we can save the tree, I think that would be good. And then I'd also like to potentially see if we can get more street trees along that parkway, opposite on the other side of the driveway. I don't know what the prescribed street tree is for the street, if it's the same species or not, and maybe taking that tree out and putting in the appropriate street tree makes sense. So that's maybe the landscape people can comment on that. Keith's comment about the railing, I think I tend to agree with. It'd be nice if that element really read all the way through instead of kind of starting tall and then dipping down, and it already has something interrupting it coming through on the south side. And then I'm a little concerned with the overhang in the front of that element. I know that programmatically you need the space, but that one element seems to loom a little bit over the sidewalk for me.
Here, Clay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And I don't see it so much in the perspective. I get it and I understand it. When I look at the elevation, though, it looks like it's right there over the sidewalk. And I think you can play with that sensitivity a little bit and refine that a little bit more. I think you need to do something with the trash enclosure. I don't think that where you have it is appropriate. I think you could find another spot. I know you have an HVAC unit on the ground floor. Maybe that could go to the roof, or maybe there's another way to figure that out. And then Paul brought up a good point about the entry on the north side of the property, the pedestrian entry for the unit. I think it's a requirement to have. I think it needs to be studied a little bit more, because you potentially can gain some square footage for something else, or utilize that space if you can reroute that and maybe make the stairs a little bit more efficient.
I'm sorry, you said requirement? I didn't follow that. What
was it's probably a requirement for your client to have, if he wants to go down and walk down to the beach, or if he has a visitor coming by, they're probably going to come that way. They're not going to go through the garage and into the house, right?
Right.
So I think studying that a little bit for me, and I think that's all I have.
Thanks. Okay, Carol?
And please. So, may I just use this as okay? Well, first of all, I just want to start with what I think is really good. Well, first, I think the graphics are wonderful. I think it reads really well, and it helps me understand sort of the nature of the project. I'm in favor of the trash enclosure being located as it is, because as an aesthetic board, it is screened from the public view, and it doesn't. I thought it was really well placed. The hardscape has a dual purpose of people walking through and getting to the trash, and for the handicap chair to be rolled through that and then into the commercial space. So I thought the sighting of that was nice, because I really always feel that hardscape, if possible, should have more than one purpose. It should be multi-used. But primarily, it just gives you a lot of opportunity to screen and still have enough remaining space for some kind of very usable, functional outdoor space. So I'm very comfortable with that. At first, when I looked at that, the siting of the building, I thought, well, this really, being quarter, this really is not a lot of space to really landscape in front of the building. But then after I thought about that, we really do have an opportunity to, frame the project. Let's say this is a good green space, this is a good green space, this is going to be very small, very tight. But does that really matter? And as I was looking at it more and more, I was thinking, it really doesn't, because you are allowing enough green space on each side. I like the idea that there is a pedestrian gate on this side, because it looks more residential than commercial. And if the gate is small in scale and has a very a character that is very residential, then I think that'll be very successful in addition to the neighborhood. I like that it's off-centered, because then you do have an opportunity to get some tall screening in here. So I think the siting of this as a site plan, I think this is really successful. I'm not as concerned with my colleagues about the removal of the street tree, because I do feel that losing one tree, gaining one, and then potentially gaining two more on this side. So what's going on? We are removing one tree, but the project then allows two additional trees and one new tree. And I think for a tree removal, I think we're actually the city. Aesthetically, as street trees go, we're really gaining a lot. So I'm not concerned about that. I like that we're breaking up our hardscape with as much pervious material as possible. I do share Gary's concern and comment that graphically we're showing a lot of landscaping bellowing over the walls. And my colleague Chris and I were discussing some solutions, and I know he's going to comment on that. So I think that there's solutions in the works. I like the style of architecture. I think it fits the neighborhood. I think mass, bulk, and scale is consistent with policy and guidelines. I do share Clay's comment about that this frontage piece appears to be looming over the sidewalk, and I do share that. But it seems like there might be solutions offered for that. So overall, I think this is, I'm supportive of this project. Thank you.
Chris?
Well, I don't have much more to add. Actually, much of what I was going to say has been said already, so I won't repeat. Addressing the planter issue that Carol brought up, I just think it would be helpful to sort of incorporate that into the architecture somehow, so that you're able to, you don't just have freestanding pots that are going to dry out faster, and you can actually maybe incorporate the irrigation into throughout the building as well. So I think that's all I'm going to add at this point. I like the project.
Thanks, Chris. I think we had some good comments. I think there isn't really anything I totally disagree with the other comments, but I'll just reiterate the ones that I am sensitive about. As far as the tree is concerned, like Carol, I'm not too concerned about it. I feel that if the building stays on one side anyway, like to the northern side, I think whether this driveway ends up moving here or here, the proximity of the tree to that driveway is always going to be a problem. And so even if you can shift it, it's going to be a problem still. And so maybe the best thing really is just to take it out and put it somewhere else. That's kind of my view, and we would get the others. Architecturally, I think that the building fits in well in this neighborhood. I think this is the neighborhood for that sort of thing. I like the design right off. I agree with Paul on the edges, the corners that you just chamfered there, that the top one probably needs to be either slightly smaller or exactly the same or something like that. I think that that's your design, and as your design, I mean, I think it looks okay. I mean, I'm fine with it. I think it has a nice touch. Keith made that point, Keith and Clay, about the point of the interruption, the box with the line going back here, and I agree with them. I see it right off. It has a small element in that here where it pops down here, and but I'm not too worried about this one. This is the one really that kind of throws things off for me. If I'm correct, and I look on the plans, the amount that this comes over is very small. So I'm not as opposed to that so much, but I think that when you study it, I'll let you go. You've heard what the others have to say. The one thing about the entry that I'm thinking about is yes, you may need to have a separate entry. I like Paul's idea, but you guys will decide which direction you want to go. One thing I'd like this not to be, though, is that I'd like that whatever material you put in front here allows enough light into there so that this seems a lot brighter than a dark hole in a sense. So I mean, it may be that you use a different material down here, and let the beauty of the entrance, while still having your security, be there and allow light into there. I think that would be a really nice thing. And then you don't feel as though when people are walking by, they just throw their beer bottles over the end, or to dispose of stuff, because it's easily seen. Again, the planters up here, yes, make sure you have enough area to do that. I generally like the layout on the site. If you could integrate the trash, okay, but it's not a big deal for me because I think it does help kind of screen the parking a little bit, and I'm okay with it over there. I think that you have pluses and minuses wherever you put it, and it seems to work okay for me. The comments they made about the open space, a trade-off again, it's not enough for me to say that doesn't work, but I think what the other comments, I'll just let them go with that. But generally, I like the project a lot in the direction that you're heading.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is for comments only. Maybe we can have a motion. Anyone like to make a motion on this project for comments only? Should I just?
Yes.
Okay. The board is appreciative of the presentation and the clarity of the presentation, and generally feels that the mass, bulk, and scale is acceptable. That the design style of the building is acceptable for this area of the city. Let's see what else. I'm going to comment about the trees here. Again, this is mine, so we'll come under discussion. As far as relocating or not relocating, but replacing the existing tree with more appropriate specimens in the parkway, the board feels comfortable with that proposal. And that's the let's see here. I don't know if I should go into all this detail. Yeah. The board would like the applicant to study the architecture for the following elements: the apparent heaviness of the projection, the second floor projection over the first. The alignment of the finish on the second floor as it continues towards the rear or towards the east, broken by the box bay window. Study the use of the size of the chamfers at the upper level for its compatibility with the one at the lower level. Study the size of the planting boxes on the decks for generous planting area. Study the street entrance for the living unit for allowing light and visibility into the entrance area. But in general, the board likes the direction that the project is heading in. Okay, that's not my best. Anyone would like to either second that and under discussion? Oh, sorry, I need a first. Anybody like to first it? Chris? We have a first in Chris. Second by? Sorry? By Paul. So we have a second by Paul and under discussion.
One comment, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Paul.
On the comment about the street trees, when you said the board members or the board, can we say some members are okay?
I'm fine with that.
I would concur because
I agree.
you should. And I'm looking at some of the trees, and some of those trees have been replaced on projects that have been moved in comparison to that tree that hasn't been moved, and the size of it is substantial. So I would, for one, would like to add on to that comment that one board member is very opposed to removing.
I'm fine with that.
It's fine.
And that's direction to you for the next time you come, that's some information you'll need to provide to the board.
Mr. Chair, do you want to say the board is split? Or do you want to take a straw vote? Instead of, like,
I'm
saying
either way.
One
I'd
board
like to,
member is really concerned, one board member is not so concerned.
Okay.
There's another one that really likes the idea of removing it.
Okay, with the first and second, the first, what would?
I'd just say the board is split.
Okay.
Let's take a straw vote.
It might be a little too early in this project because we don't
Yeah.
know the size of the tree, we don't know the health of the tree. Let them come back with additional information.
We also don't know how many trees will be appropriate to add to the frontage because there's a certain rhythm established.
If I could
on the street.
suggest then, either the maker or the seconder, just reword that portion concerning the tree.
And is to be reworded that some board members and one is adamantly opposed.
Okay. For the removal of street tree.
Some board members are okay with removal of the tree, with replacing of new ones. One is adamantly opposed against the removal of a street tree.
That clarifies
I
it.
think we understand. I mean, we understand.
Okay,
Not really.
great. So we have that in the minutes there, Kathleen? Okay. Okay, so all those in favor say aye. Oh, sorry. Yes, under discussion.
The portion of your motion that said to increase or restudy the sizes of the planter boxes, that's not what we said. That might have been what you heard of yourself. What our position, and we had discussed this together, was in order to accomplish what these graphics are representing, the planters should be as part of the wall in order to have the height so the plants could be trailing over. Otherwise, they're trailing over 42 inches and then trailing back down, which is not going to happen.
I think if I could remember correctly, I think all I said was that the planters be substantial enough to provide.
That's not what our intention was. If you want to keep that and add something.
The intention
Up to
was
the first and the second. If you'd like to reword it.
The intention is to study structurally incorporating the planters as part of the walls in order to get the planter soil just few inches under the top in order to allow plants to cascade over. That's what the direction is. It has nothing to do with the planter size on the
Mine was
elevation.
different to yours. I wasn't trying to
Okay.
interpret yours.
Okay.
I just made a different one.
Okay.
Mine is just different to yours.
Okay, well, you could have incorporated planters and then planters on the patio floor, which I think are kind of irrelevant because the community will never see the planters on the floor. So we could add that as part of your motion, or we
I
could
think the
substitute
applicant
it.
understands.
Yeah, Chris
what we're
being the
trying to
first
say.
and Paul being the second, I think they both know where you're getting. And Chris,
You say it, Chris.
say what you'd like.
Well, I think the point was to not utilize separate pots, but to incorporate the planter into the architecture.
Thank you.
For
That's
various
fine with
reasons.
Paul.
But in order to
That's
get
right.
the soil high enough to cascade the plants, that's what the intention is.
I think they.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. And any more under discussion? No, thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those against? Motion carries. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good project. So, I think we take a 5-minute break until the third item of the night.
Oh, they're here. They're here.
No? Not here for the last time. Okay, we'll. Sorry about that. We'll close for another 10 minutes at max. Right.
Well, why don't you just lay them out here? We'll have them available for you.
Oh yeah. I think Paul was saying that you might be able to open the laptop flat and the TV camera would zoom in on it,
Okay.
and you may be able
Well,
to
I
get.
can't do flat, unfortunately. I think my laptop would get very angry with me if I did that.
Okay.
But we can go without it. A PowerPoint. I can just sort of. I have a few bullet points to sort of read off of.
Okay. If you can just press that button there, the middle button on that, the middle, just the, there. You, okay.
Okay, terrific.
And state your name for the record. Well, their option. What would you like to do? It's your presentation.
We have a number of different materials to talk to you about today. We have an overview that probably would be appropriate to show on the screen. It sort of shows all of the locations. We have some photo simulations that likewise, if we're maybe I should even sit over here because we can use that then to project.
Yeah, but it's in an
Yeah.
angle.
It's at an angle.
So I'm gonna sit over here, and then we'll use this area. It looks like for the
Presentation.
monitor.
Okay.
We can't do a PowerPoint presentation and connect the computer.
Mr. Chair,
You need to have set it up.
I'd like to rephrase. I can't see the small. If you have a full-scale plan, if I could please have it, then I could see what you're proposing.
Do you only have the one, or you have more than one? Okay, let's start again. If you could state your name for the
Absolutely.
record, and then we'll proceed from there.
My name is Patrick Ryan. I'm outside counsel for NextG Networks. My address is 1444 Blake Street, Denver, Colorado 80202. Heidi.
Heidi Payne, project manager with NextG Networks. My interest is 19 Blue Heron, Aliso Viejo.
Thank you. Okay.
So what we have, NextG is proposing a multiple location site that involves locations in the public rights of way throughout the city of Santa Barbara. I'll provide an overview in a minute as to what we're doing, but the installations that we're proposing are numerous in nature and involves several hundred to 7,000 feet of fiber optic cables. So it isn't easy to sort of show you on a small sheet. It's a numerous sheets with lots of different things that are being proposed. What we're hoping to go over with you today is we can put this up on the screen so that everybody can see the overall layout of what it is that NextG is proposing on a sort of a plan view, so that you can see the breadth of it and how it covers everything within the city's rights of way. And then we have some photographs of typical installations.
Okay.
But before we get into the plans,
the largest.
Okay. And before we get into the plans, I'd like to give a small overview as to who NextG Networks is and kind of what we're proposing, unless everybody's already familiar with that.
Just a brief overview would be fine.
Okay.
Because it looks like we have a lot to go through here.
We do. NextG has been working with this city for over a year for the deployment of a combined fiber optic cable system that also includes the installations of antennas at various different locations throughout the city. The project is much broader in scope than the city of Santa Barbara. It includes about the same amount of installations proposed in the county of Santa Barbara, about 20 installations in the city of Goleta, and about 8 installations in Carpinteria. So it starts up in Goleta, and it runs all the way down to Carpinteria. NextG Networks is not a company that you will have heard of probably before today, because it doesn't sell any services directly to the public. It's a regulated carrier's carrier. In other words, NextG Networks customers are not the people who use cell phones, but the companies themselves that then sell cell phone service to the general public. We are a certificated public utility under Section 7901 of the Public Utilities Code, and have the right to enter and occupy the public rights of way. NextG also owns through a joint ownership co-op through the Southern California Joint Pole Association, is a joint owner in the various different utility poles that NextG will be attaching to. Our overall project in the city of Santa Barbara consists of, correct me if I get the numbers wrong, but it consists of a total of 55 installations of antennas on utility poles that we call nodes. Of those 55 nodes, 4 of them are proposed to be placed on city-owned street lights. We're working on an agreement right now with the city attorney in order to see if we can reach agreement on attaching to those street lights. If not, we would then propose to put in a new alternative structure in the right-of-way. But as a matter of policy, we believe that we'll be able to satisfy the city's concerns about minimizing new infrastructure and reach agreement. And there is one new installation for which a streetlight is not available. So 55 installations, 50 of them are on existing utility poles, jointly owned by NextG already. 4 streetlights, 1 new pole. There are, within that entire scope of 55, 7 of those sites are in the historic district. And we are going to be looking at that separately with the Historic Landmarks Commission. I forget the date, I believe on the 2nd of September, and then, pending approval of the Historic Landmarks Commission, then we'll come back to you for approval for those 7 sites. So, let me roll out one of our sets of plans here. So these are our installations right along here that are going to follow existing utility lines. And so what we're showing here aren't going to be node installations, what we call the nodes. Remember the antenna locations that are installed, but instead fiber optic cables. And so we wanted to sort of give you a sense overall of where our fiber optic cables are going to be placed, in these cases above ground, following existing utility corridors, and together with other communications lines and other utility cables that are on those poles. These are the Heidi. These are the node locations.
The node locations, right?
These and this plan, is this the same plan?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so we've got another sheet here that shows another and we're happy to go through this, these details as well, although I think it's going to be very useful for us to show photographs of what we're proposing.
Okay. So these essentially what you're showing us is the route at which the fiber optic cable will take.
Correct.
And each of these little brown lines here indicate what? What do each of these little brown?
Oh, those are actually pole numbers. They're identifiers when this is blown out.
Okay.
Clearly red is an identifier.
So, so the only time you actually have a node then is where we have one of these little sign things here?
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Let's see. Heidi, do you have the photographs or all those?
I do.
Okay, so here we are. So this is and we do have additional copies of this that we can distribute.
Do you have that these are reduced scale plans? Do you have, are those the original?
This is not in a reduced scale. We do have breakaways because typically the aerial installations don't require specific permitting. They just require traffic control plans, and so we don't generate reduced scale plans. What we have here are some reduced scale plans for certain sections of trenching. Okay, but I don't think that's going to be relevant. I don't believe that's relevant to what you're looking for. And so instead, what I'd like to show you is, and then we also have submitted what these are the individual node installations, and then each one of those has a photograph. There's about 50 of them.
Okay. Continue.
Can you distribute these?
Yeah, why don't you distribute those, and do we have an extra set that we can also put on the overhead? How many do we have?
8.
And are there 8 members?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's keep one here.
Okay.
And I'll let you distribute the rest.
Let's pass a few. You want another one over there?
Yes.
Okay. Give this to Paul. Okay. It looks like we have enough. Okay.
Good. Okay, and so I'll just go through the photographs here. Got them upside down. This first photograph, and I don't know the locations. Maybe Bill or Heidi can help if there's any specific questions about where these are located. But these are all photographs of.
When you show this, just point out where it is, or just tell us where it is, and we might be able to help you on your map.
Well, actually, these are just typicals. Typical wood
But
poles.
these are photographs in the city of Santa Barbara, or no?
Some of them are not. Some of them are county. We went with the best photos.
Okay, so these are typical photographs, and the whole rationale for showing typicals here is that there are 2 or 3 different standard types of installations that we install, and they make no, it really makes no difference because each installation is so similar in size and scope. So this is a before and after shot. This is just a typical photograph of a utility pole with all the other communication lines that are there. Thank you. And that is the box, a new box that next year will be installing. And there's a small antenna. How tall is the antenna? Here, 24 inches, 26 inches. This is So we're going to call this our strand mount application, because this antenna actually does not attach to the pole, but instead attaches to the fiber optic cable strand. That is about 8 to 10 feet away from the pole.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. This next photograph is, again, the same equipment, and it's on a jointly owned utility pole. This is the before photo, this is the after photo. The difference here is that this is not a strand mount. This is instead a mount on the pole. There's a little bit of perspective here. The mount actually extends over the street, and so there's a standoff here.
How much is that standoff?
It's a 3-foot standoff.
3 feet? Okay.
And the requirement for that standoff is not something that we set. It's a rule that's set by the California Public Utilities Commission and what they call General Order 95. They require that antennas be offset a certain distance in order to allow for climbing space to be maintained and respected.
So what you're saying is, on this one where you're seeing the before and after, is it looks like it's right next to the pole, but
it's a perspective. It's over the road.
So it comes towards the road and it would stick out something like that.
That's about right.
Right?
Is that the same thing with the box? How far is that box?
The box does not have to stand off.
So the general order for climbing that pole, that doesn't apply for that?
The way GO 95 applies is there's basically two ways to look at a pole. If you look at a sort of plan view vertically, it looks like like a pie, and there's four what are known as quadrants, and so if you attach within that quadrant, you're okay. But now as you go up the pole vertically, different things, different rules, come into play. In this particular case, we're above the communication space, and so there's cables and lines, and that's where the offset is required to take place.
Now, let me get this straight. So you're set in 4 quadrants, and your box is 16 inches.
It's you're asking about the width of our box?
Yeah, the width of your box is over 16 inches wide. That's over half the dimension of the pole. So
this is also not considered climbing space.
Yeah, that's right, because we're not in the vertical portion of the climbing space, but we're authorized to install the pole here. I'm sorry, to install the box at this location.
Okay, go ahead. Keep going. We'll have other questions again.
Oh, this is the pole top. Okay, and so this is another typical installation of ours, where the antenna is attached to the pole, the actual top of the pole. And we do this in cases where there are not primary electrical lines at the top of the pole. We can attach to the top.
Okay.
Okay. This. All right. So let's look at this sheet right here. This is one of the 4 street lights that we're proposing. This is obviously just a photograph of the street light without our installation, and this shows our installation. This is the somewhat different antenna that we designed that would, we think blend in a little bit better with the street light.
Okay.
Mounts at the top.
Quick question. I think most of the members will have the same question, so I'm going to ask it now. The city is moving away from these standards, and are you proposing to the city then that this would be an attachment to our more historic poles, our historic standards?
Do we have a photo sim of one of the historic?
Well, we haven't proposed any new street light, anything attaching to a street light or a new pole in a historic district.
Well, not in the historic.
Right.
The whole city is moving away from this standard.
The Cobra. The more ornamental.
The Cobra light fitting is not anymore used here, and we have a different design that the city has approved.
How tall is that pole? How tall is that new street light?
It varies.
It varies, but it's a different pole. It's a green pole in most instances, and it has it's not as bland as this Cobra. So.
And does the city have a program right now to replace these street lights with those?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'd be happy to work with you on proposing a design that would accommodate that. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Keep going.
That is essentially our overview. This is the one street light. The new pole that we're proposing in an area where there is not a street light. And what we're doing here, this photo doesn't quite projected quite as well as we'd like. But there's we try to use existing infrastructure where it's available to minimize the impact. In this particular case, we're proposing replacing a no parking sign with a pole that's obviously much taller, about 24 feet in height. And we would move the no parking. This doesn't show that, but we would propose moving the no parking sign over
to this pole?
Over to the pole.
What address is that?
That is along.
It looks like it's
It's along the.
yeah.
Cesar Chavez?
Yes, I believe so.
That's the tennis court, so Fez Parker? Yes, I think so. Yeah. What are these boxes?
Those are pre-existing boxes. We believe that those are maintained by another utility
I see.
in the right of way, but they have nothing to do with what NextG is proposing, and are obviously much larger than what we're proposing.
Okay. So if you could then, these 4 areas that specifically you're looking at, maybe you could just, do you want to go through these and tell us what these are about, the location, and which one of those proposals you're
Sure.
in that location?
Sure.
How about that?
Okay, so this first one, it looks like is an address at,
So I'm looking at the corner of Mitchell Torreno and State Street. It's, is it?
1427 State Street, it looks like approximately.
Okay.
All right. So this is a proposal on a, this is a pole top proposal.
Existing
On an
pole?
existing utility pole. And so since there are no overhead lines, we would propose installing the antenna on top, which would blend into the verticality of the pole.
And then that would be a box.
And then add a new box.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Let's look at the other one. So,
That would all be the same for.
okay, this.
What that's showing because there's no primary power available here. We would be obtaining power from another pole. It's very small.
So there'd be
Park and
another
box.
box on
It's
another pole.
right. It's like a meter. It's similar to it.
Okay, so associated with this particular location, we have the little 26-inch pole at the top. Then we have this box that is mounted on the side, and then to get power to it, there's another box on another adjacent pole that would run a line. To
That would apply, I believe, in 3 of the 50.
3 of the
Of
locations.
the existing utility poles.
Okay, let's see the other 2 locations that are similar to that. Well, let's just go to this one is 16 East Mission Street. And
So this is obviously another pole top installation. It's a utility line that does not have any, this
Power?
utility pole does not have any power on top, so we're proposing installing the antenna on top here.
similar again. Okay, so at another adjacent, we have this with the power that goes across here.
In the comm space, yes.
Okay, and that's it there. Power goes across. Okay, what is the is the red the power, and what is the green and blue?
That, I believe, is our proposed, okay.
The green and blue comes from this box here, which I believe must be where you have that little antenna on top, and then
The green is the fiber.
that's the fiber. And so red is what, power?
Power. Secondary power.
Yeah,
Okay,
Or.
okay,
it's our low voltage.
Right.
okay.
Okay.
All right, let's take the next one, and then this one is Correo Street, 135 East Correo Street. Okay,
And that's actually the furthest from that we looked at earlier.
so this is on an existing Cobra pole.
But this isn't a picture of it.
That's just a no. That's just a right. That's just.
It's a
you're saying
photograph
that's
of
not
the
a
actual
picture
pole.
Of that pole.
What do you,
This is Correo and Santa Barbara Street, so that could be the pole. That could be the pole.
okay.
So what you're going to place one of these on top. Your proposal
Correct.
is, and that's where the Cobra is, and there are traffic. Okay, the traffic control lights. There's a cross. Okay, so that's your box there.
Exactly.
Is your new decorative street light going to be going to replace then the traffic control signals and all of them? Okay.
Yeah. No?
There's certain areas where we have to maintain the
Existing.
light out beyond the sidewalk, so there'll definitely be areas where the Cobra head will still remain. But the direction is to, in an instance when a light needs to be replaced, to replace it with the concrete fluted pole, and the domus fixture in this Malaga green color. That's what the city's going to. So the question that Chris asked was, are you sure that none of these poles, I mean, what do you do in an instance when they take a pole down and they want to put in the traditional fixture? That's what he was asking.
The new historic fixture.
The new city standard, which is the fluted concrete pole. Understood.
Well, we need to look at those, I think, on a case-by-case basis. But I believe that in this particular case, my understanding tracks with yours. In other words, that it would be more unusual to replace a traffic, an area where there's traffic control with a street light than it would be just a standalone street light. And so that this case, I don't know if that would be replaced, but if it were, we would be happy to come up with a proposal. I'm not seeing anything in your standards here that would indicate that we couldn't attach to it as well. It looks very similar in size, and we'd be happy to paint it to match and to work with you on something that fits. Alternatively, I mean, some cities just prefer that we don't attach any street lights or that we don't use traffic control signals. In that case, we would need to come back with some sort of a new proposed pole in the right of way, not unlike the replacement that we showed earlier for the parking signs. It's your preference. Most cities prefer that we utilize the existing infrastructure. We're happy to even write into the agreement that we would migrate with you on that and work with you on that.
Okay.
On that change out.
All right. And is this the last one then? 223 Castillo.
Okay.
223 Castillo Street.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is another Cobra mounted fixture similar to that with a sign, and then there's a box behind the sign. And then I guess it would look like that. Like that one.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else before questions?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, there's obviously 55 different applications that are very similar to these. With a set of plans that looks very much like this. How would you like to go through them, or?
Well, once I think we're only charged with doing the 4 at this time, but with the knowledge that there are 55 throughout the city.
Okay.
Right. So that's what we have. So at this time, with the end of the presentation, you have something to say?
No.
Oh, no. Okay, just asking. So I'm going to open it up to the public. Would anyone in the public like to comment on this project? Seeing no one, I'll close that portion and bring it back. Seeing no one stepping forward, I'll bring that back to staff.
We have one letter of opposition from Ms. Paula Westbury.
Thank you very much, and bring it back to the board for questions. And Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any restrictions on finish colors for the antenna part of the equipment? Are there any technical reasons why it can't be painted or treated with a different finish?
There are some restrictions on the type of paint that we can use. You can't use a metal-based paint, but no, there are other than that no general restrictions. In fact, it's squarely within. It's one of the things that's enumerated within the ABR's rights is to talk to us about color preferences. We believe, if we can go through some of the samples, we believe that the better color for a let's look at what I'd like to. How many of our installations are going to be strand mounts?
I would say about 30.
Okay, so the majority of our installations are going to be strand mounts, which is this type of an installation. Okay, right? We believe that the best color for a strand mount is going to be white. And in most cases, we believe that generally the best color antenna for the antenna is going to be white because it tends to blend into the sky. People tend to not be caught by white, but that's we've proposed white in each of these locations. But that's the standard.
So in our consideration, though, the color is basically open. We can
yes, it
look
is.
at that. Okay,
yes,
that's the only question I really.
Yeah,
have.
we would just advise that you might want to consider if you do consider coloring that. It really does stand out if you paint anything other than white. If you were to propose a color people go back and forth on these arm mounts as to whether or not they should be white or brown. But the more typical case where you'd paint the antenna to match is on the configuration where the antenna comes straight up from the pole, because then it would be the same color as the pole. And in each case, we're already proposing to paint the box the color of the pole.
Okay, thanks. Any others, Keith?
Nope.
Gary.
Couple of questions. One, where you're trenching the trenching risers, and are there going to be cabinet furniture or cabinet boxes in the ground in those areas?
No, there's a. No, have you had? Let me ask. Have you had any review of proposals from Verizon or from AT&T for the
Yes.
Project Lightspeed?
Not Lightspeed?
For what?
You have probably the Verizon FiOS. Maybe not.
We've had proposals for
AT&T
cell
Lightspeed.
towers
Cell tower.
from all of the companies. What kind of specifics again?
No, the question isn't related to cell towers. It's related to ground
No,
furniture and the rights of way. And there's a number. What I was getting at is there's the Verizon and AT&T are right now in the midst of upgrading their systems in order to compete with the cable operators, and they're installing significant installations, not unlike the type of installation that we saw. Let's go back to that one picture of the pole. The easy answer is no, we have nothing like that. But the just to kind of show, let's pull up that picture of the that was of the new pole.
The new pole.
Yeah.
It's right here. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is I don't know why industry calls it furniture. I don't imagine why anybody would want to sit down on it or draw that analogy, but it's called ground furniture in industry parlance. And this is the type of installation that some of the utility companies are installing periodically in the rights of way. Very clearly, no. NextG is not proposing anything like
You're
that.
not proposing any? Okay.
Absolutely not. There will be small in certain areas where the riser goes down into the trenching. There's and I can have one of our construction managers speak more to the detail, but there may be a splice box or a hand hole.
So
the ground?
they'll be mostly
Close to the ground.
conduits coming up the side of poles?
Correct.
And the diameter of those, are they going to be 4-inch conduits? Are they going to be 2-inch, 3-inch?
2-inch conduit.
Mostly 2-inch conduits.
Okay.
And the overhead lines that you're proposing to add onto that, is it one fiber optic line? Is it a bundle, a huge bundle? What is the diameter of the overhead lines that we're talking about?
What is the count of our?
Probably about a half inch. It's one line fiber optic cable.
Good.
Okay.
And we're not going to have any of the big boxes aside from the antennas that we're proposing to hang on the cables that they're subject to the plans. We're not going to be hanging any of the extra boxes that hang off of those lines, typical of what you would see in a FiOS or a.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. Keep going.
Are you proposing any dishes, any satellite dishes, or any round antennas? All of the antennas that you're having are cylinder, the ones that you proposed today?
That's correct.
And the on the pole-mounted boxes that you're proposing, you said that the color that you'll be proposing is that would be to match the pole that is there?
That's correct.
Galvanized pole, they'll be cold galvanized.
Wood
poles will be painted brown.
Galvanized, what would we just painted to match?
Yeah, everything's powder coated. So whether it be a wood pole, it's powder coated brown, or it's a concrete pole, it's powder coated to look like a concrete pole. We have a couple different samples. We'll look at the concrete pole. We have a couple different powder coatings we fill in. And then same thing with the steel pole. We powder coat that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Dawn?
Thanks.
This might be a part staff question, but it's also because of my ignorance in this technology, because I just don't understand it. But this is different than the application that we saw on Alomar because why? It didn't get noticed to anybody. And is it because it's a fiber optic cable system, it's not transmitting like the cable pole that we reviewed on Upper Alomar? Is that why it's different? And it didn't have to be noticed, or?
Those projects were specifically like cell towers sites for cellular companies. The city's looking at this slightly different in the aspect that it's a different technology, fiber optic. Yeah.
So, but we still have some, because you need antennas, and I'm looking at this because it looks very similar. It's a pole with an antenna on top. It's very similar to the structure that we reviewed on that other project. So there is some information being transmitted through these poles, and then into the cables via microwave.
No,
Or via what? How is it coming in? And
the
why is it different than the cell site reception?
Well, let me just ask one point of clarification. Is the site that you're referring to, was it in the public right-of-way or was it on private property?
It was on in the public right-of-way.
Okay.
Don, just also to add, the code does not require us to do mailed notices for cell tower sites. We've been doing that more of a courtesy when it's one location. And
Well, the one
especially in
time you did it as a courtesy, it sparked a lot of controversy. So for one address, now we have 50, and nobody's. So that's why, because but there's too many. Okay.
Well,
specifically notice a citywide project.
Okay.
and this is also, we're making an application under the city's code, even though this is a new technology.
No, I understand that. Yeah, I understand that. And then I think that what I'm going to have to do on this project is step down, because I don't think I'd be able to give you an unbiased opinion as to approving these. So, Michelle, I'm going to step down from this project.
I mean, she gets to go home early.
Just joking.
Okay, Paul? Thanks, Don.
A couple questions, just to clarify that I'm hearing this right. In this application, this is going to be 3 feet from the pole, but it's always going to be over the right-of-way or over the roadway. It's not going to be as drawn, which is over the lines. Is that correct? Or can it be located this direction? Or is it our choice in which quadrant the antenna sticks out 3 feet?
Let me have Chris answer that question.
It's Edison's.
Excuse me, sir. If you could just state your name when you answer.
And how about everybody to that chair?
It's Edison's choice on where that antenna's mounted. We always try to mount it out street side, keep finding space on the pole, and the line to be able to find the pole. If you wanted it mounted to the side, we just have to go back to Edison and make sure that they would approve of that. But it's mainly pointed out toward the street light for lineman safety and safety of the lineman that actually find the roof pole. That's why it's like that.
Thank you. My concern is driving on certain streets and sticking this thing, visually seeing this protruding out from the pole. And so where this is occurring, how many times will this be in town? Like oodles, or is this a handful of times? Is it a possibility of getting like a photo sim of where we can see to see? Because if we're driving down the road and we have certain visual vistas that we look at, and then we're going to see this antenna sticking up in the way, in some places it might matter. So how often does this occur, and is it impossible to do a little photo sim so we can visually see that having that obstruction in what we want to say is the vista towards the ocean or a mountain or some kind of thing?
Well, we can provide a photo sim. The problem, the challenge we have is whether or not we can actually obtain approval to mount it any other way.
Well, that was the question, because then I want the board to understand that in applications this might be sticking out, or a majority of the time it's going to be sticking out over the right-of-way. So like when we're driving down Las Positas and we have a certain canyon that we're used to, we're now going to start seeing this thing in our vista.
So, but the breakdown is, keep me honest here, but we have about 30 of the installations are of the strand mount type. And how many are pole top, do we know?
3.
3 are pole top. And just doing simple math, we would have about, 17 or so that would be like this then.
You answered my question, which is what I wanted. The second question I had was this piece of equipment here. The width of this box is 16 feet wide?
Inches.
16 inches. 16 inches wide? Oh. Okay. It's noted to be 8 feet off the ground. Can this ever be located on the ground?
No.
Or not near the ground, like, a couple inches above, or built in a shroud, basically at ground level?
SCE requires that it's a minimum of 8 feet off the ground.
And then the other thing I noticed is that this is 4 inches from the pole. There's a standoff from it.
And that again is for Edison. And most of the design you'll see 8 feet up is a GO95 deal with Edison. Same thing, 4-inch stood off the poles for a lineman to be able to get his hands around the pole when he climbed the pole, be able to put a safety strap around it. That's why they want it off the pole. Okay. Same thing when we talked about the antenna. There's 17, I guess, that are pointing over the road. that's something that I just confirmed with Bill that walked these with Edison, said that that's where Edison said we approve to mount that antenna on pole.
And this was a 3-foot cantilevered arm, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. That's all my questions.
Okay, thank you. Clay? Carol?
So, the requirement list for plan submittal is that the plans are per scale. And I think a lot of our questions, just trying to understand what this is going to look like, would have been answered if we had a set of plans per dimension. So my questions are really kind of based on just this missing information. Chris, do we have that old submittal of the light standards that were part of the, okay. So keeping in mind where the future light pole designs are going to be, do you see any concern about the like, let's just take this one. If you said that there's a standard of, what did you say, 6 feet? 8 feet?
That would apply to wood utility poles, correct?
The utility poles.
Wood utility.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily apply to these.
Okay, but do you see, because in my mind, dimensionally, first of all, dimension, what is the width of the antenna? That thing that sits on the top. What is the width? No.
Are you talking about street light, or are you talking
the street,
about
the street
Oh, I'm
lights.
sorry.
Like this thing. What is the maximum width in the middle of that? How many inches is that?
Did you not get a copy of all of these? Because we do have specific plans that show the dimensions for each of the installations.
I've been asking. Nobody seems to. I asked you. Nobody seems to have that.
So we did submit the large size.
Yeah, we submitted 3 copies of large.
Where are those?
Well, they were given back to us.
Yeah, they were told they weren't.
We understood that they weren't needed.
That's what we're told.
Well, that was an error. Because there's all that information that's missing. So do you have it in your head how many inches wide that is? I know you can't read it. I can't read it.
Let's see. This is 10 inches wide, and let's see, across the base here, the widest portion there.
Okay, so that's 10. So the maximum dimension at the middle is 10 inches.
Right.
What is the maximum width of the existing down here? Not the base, but the pole itself. What is the maximum inches right here?
That depends on what street light you're attaching to. It changes.
Okay. Okay, so let me just let me ask the chair to help me understand something. This is the new standard that's in our jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. This is Cabrillo. So this would be in our jurisdiction. Would this be one too?
Yeah, this is up on the Mesa.
On the Mesa?
We have in a few locations on the Mesa.
Okay, so you, in your planning, I actually think they really need to coordinate this because, for instance, if you're proposing to put the new antenna on top of something like this, that would be 100% unacceptable. If you're trying to put the antenna on top of this, I would find that unacceptable too. I almost need, to me this isn't quite complete as far as knowing the direction here.
Where their proposal is unacceptable, I'm surmising that then they would propose one of these somewhere pretty close, and then you have to consider that application.
Okay, so just looking at this is 10 inches, and then so this looks fluted to me. This looks like it's bigger on the bottom, and then it gets skinny. What is this like?
3.5, I believe,
okay,
and
then what is
8,
the maximum
about
on
8
the
at the bottom. The maximum, that particular pole you're looking at is about 8 maximum. You can get
at
them.
the middle.
Just again, they come in all flavors and sizes.
Okay.
So you could say, hey, we'd like a little bit bigger one here, and then again, that could be painted green if it's going to match the decor of the lights, or there's a lot of different things.
Now my next question.
That was the dimensions of the top
And then
of the pole.
what is it? So we know that it's 10 inches this way. What is the dimension this way? The height of it?
It's 47 and
47.
47.47.
Yeah.
So 40, like 4 feet.
This is 4 feet tall?
4
Yes.
feet by 10 inches?
That's
Is that what this gentleman is saying?
47.47
Okay.
inches.
Okay. And, okay, so when I recall when we were going through this whole thing, birds perching on things is really a problem, and that, the little sticks, to deter the birds, because then it aesthetically looks really messy with all this white stuff. In your experience with different cities, how do you prevent the birds, or is that a problem? What do you do with that?
I think it's got it. Isn't the antenna domed a little bit at the top, and it's designed to be to be bird unfriendly, while at the same time.
Here. It's not easy for perching purposes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
And it's also slippery for birds because it's plastic.
Right.
Okay.
And so it's not an attractive place for them to land.
Okay.
Let me make a suggestion on these, because in our discussions with city and the city staff, like you, everybody's concerned about these attachments to city streetlights. Not only for the reasons that you've described about the replacements for the replacement plan for the upgrade to the, it's sort of an oxymoron, the upgrade to the retro view of the city lights, but there are lots of reasons we need to enter into an agreement in order to do that. Otherwise, we're going to have to come back for a proposal. These are special cases, and we would be fine with splitting them out. In fact, I think it would be preferable for us to split out these proposals on city street lights, deal with them separately on a case-by-case basis, because it's just 4. And we're here, asking for approval for 55, and we just hate to get the rest of the project tainted by these 4, and believe we can come up with a proposal that would address all of your questions separately with excruciating detail.
Okay, so my last question is this. One thing that Santa Barbara does a lot is that these light poles are to direct light downward. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a lot of attention where the trees are allowed to grow higher and trimmed in such a way that all of this is really could be filled in with canopy. And it's almost encouraged because we really want the light to go down. So I'm really wondering, on a functional point of view, does this need to always be higher than the canopies? Because my question is based in a concern that part of the city and Public Works will then have a work order that goes out and says, make sure all the trees that are near these antennas are really trimmed down a certain distance and really thinned out. And then the light is going to be more dispersed, and it's not going to be very consistent with really what the city's canopies are really,
right.
The overall. So does this need clearance, where things will be trimmed underneath that height?
It does need clearance. I don't believe that any of the 4 that we're proposing to be placed on street lights are in tree canopies. I believe it's a little bit more urban.
We have this as an example. I'm not saying in the canopy. I'm just saying that if from this direction, if this tree is going to then get a work order to be trimmed down.
No.
From this point?
No.
From its no, absolutely.
No, and we'd be happy to stipulate as a condition of approval that no trees would need to be trimmed within 5 feet of the within any distance that's greater than 5 feet of the proposed installation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, Chris.
All right. My question is kind of about the shroud assembly, the piece that's sort of in the middle of the pole. Is that is, I think it was about 4 feet high also, for a 4-foot piece of equipment. As far as color on that, that's flexible also? Did we cover that? Okay. And that's on all 50 poles?
Yes.
And then as far as a clarification, the wires needed that go up these poles, are they on the outside in conduit? Is that what it was, or are you actually going up the inside?
No, it depends on we're talking about the street lights?
Well, at least the utility poles, since they're wood, would be on the outside. But the light poles, do they go up through the light, the pole itself? And on the utility poles, the conduit is white PVC or what?
Schedule 80, gray.
Okay. Gray?
Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
only in cases, you're only going to have, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're only going to have that attachment to the side of the pole, the conduit on the side, in the case where there's a riser that brings the fiber optics underground. Otherwise, the fiber optics will just follow the existing utility corridor.
Okay.
And there won't be a...
Existing conduit
That's
that
correct.
to be used. Okay. That's my questions.
Okay, so just before we go into comments, I'd like to just tell the board that what we're looking for here is comments only. Project requires environmental assessment, and that we are here to really give that we're talking about the aesthetic impact to the community. And we have to find that there is no adverse aesthetic impact when and if we ever have to approve these things. So
Before we go into comment, can I just kind of play lawyer just for 1 second?
very short.
I will be
Yeah.
very short. The role that we see, the ABR here, is not to find that there's no aesthetic impact. It's in the code that exempts this particular type of installation from a conditional use permit, and it's subject to the ABR's approval regarding the location of antennas on the site, the color, and the size of the proposed antennas, as to minimize any adverse visual impacts. So it's a very different but very important difference in standard for us.
And that is the case?
Sure.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes,
I
please.
now have a question. We have 55 of these being installed. We're looking at 4, which is less than 10%. Where are the other 51? Are they from Goleta to Carpinteria, right?
No, the 4 that you're looking at are the only 4 that you've been talking about recently. The only 4 that are installed on street lights. All of the rest are installed on existing utility poles, on the wood utility poles, and follow the model that we first offered, like this. And they are within the city of Santa Barbara. The overall project from Goleta down to Carpinteria is about 130 of these installations.
So the 4 that we're looking at are 4 of them that are on streetlights.
I'm sorry. The first 4 that we went through, no. The 4 that we've been talking about mostly have been on existing streetlights. But no, the 4 that we're looking at is a mixture of
That's what I thought.
Of the 4.
How? I have a question for staff. How many are these being reviewed by HLC?
7.
7. And those are on streetlights as well.
I believe it's a combination.
Actually, there's no streetlights in
No
the...
streetlights, but they are proposing the new pole.
One new pole is HLC.
It says here only one of the 7 will be reviewed by HLC.
That's the new pole. 7 locations. One of the 7 locations is a new pole.
Oh, is this one? Is this one?
So the 4 that we're looking at is the Q-tip looking pole, right? The one on the corner of Santa Barbara Street and Carrillo, and then 2 others that are mounted on telephone poles.
Correct.
That's what we're reviewing.
Now, it's a total of 5. The new pole.
No. Before you got here, they pulled out 4 samples, and these are the 4 that they looked at.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if you're picking this up, but we're a little I'm confused. I think others are
from
confused.
what Jaime stated earlier is that the 4 that we want to be specifically looking at for ABR are just the ones they're going to put on the light standards. On the lights. Existing lights.
Which in this proposal is 1 on the corner of Santa Barbara Street and Carrillo.
There's 4. There are 4. I can give you the addresses and possibly pull the drawings out if you'd like.
Yes, site number.
I do. GOL 52, SBR 25, SBR 51, and SBR 59.
Those are locations on their maps.
Identifiers. She has the drawings.
She's got a bunch of these sitting over there that she can pull out.
Okay.
That's what she's trying to do. Okay, so just so I'm clear, because I really want to be clear about this so I can make my comments appropriately. We're here as a board reviewing 4 installations on 4 streetlights in the city limits. We're not here to comment on the ones that are mounted on the lines, I forgot the terminology used, or the ones on the top of the poles. Is that correct?
If I read it correctly, we are to review these 4, but we clearly have to know as information that there will be 55 of these throughout the city. So you have to bear that in mind also. I mean, whether, yes, we're reviewing these 4, but that is information that is supposed to be given to us.
So we're looking at, this is where I'm confused, I think. There's 4 that we're reviewing on light standards in the city limits, and there's 7 being reviewed by HLC. That's only 11. So the other 44 are just typicals of those versions, yes? On streetlights.
That's what I gather.
On utility poles.
The rest are on utility poles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I think I'm clear now.
And I didn't ask my questions yet, and after this we will do comments, okay?
And Carol has one question
I
too.
just need to clarify, because this is important. So why are we looking at the Q-tip style at all? Because it seems like all of our 4 is on light standards, that we're not talking about the Q-tip style at all about anything, correct?
Those 4 all share that
The
style
Q-tip.
of antenna. Yes.
But I thought we had just clarified that our 4 is on light standards, which is not.
No.
Existing streetlights.
The number 4 is getting a little bit abused
No,
here.
don't. So I thought we had just established that our 4 is on light standards, which is not the Q-tip design. The Q-tip design is a standalone pole. No, that's not what we just established?
Yeah, the one that got changed, it was a road sign. It was a no parking sign, and that's got changed to a Q-tip style that says no parking on it. How many of those are going in?
There's one, and I don't believe that's part of this review because I believe that's going to the HLC next week. Is that correct?
Okay.
Okay, so of those 4, how many are Q-tips? 4. So we're not doing anything with a light standard then? Because the Q-tip design is not the light standard. The Q-tip is a standalone pole.
We're not-
I see what you're saying.
We're not-
Can I show you?
We're not doing any with a freestanding
Right, that's the Q-tip.
of the modern light fittings. They are proposing attaching to the Cobra.
Right.
So 2 of these parcels here that I'm looking at are both to be attached to the Cobra. And so I believe that this is what you're talking about, the Q-tip.
Yeah, that's the new freestanding.
Right.
No, that's not the new.
This is not a new it will stand on an existing pole with a Cobra light.
Well, it's just this.
I think the confusion might be that it's the same type of antenna, but the pole does look different with the
Yeah.
light arm.
Okay, just 3 more seconds. This is what I'm calling the Q-tip. This is a new pole with this thing on top.
This is existing pole.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
this is existing pole.
Okay, and maybe that stems from the confusion that I can't read any of the text. I don't know what I'm looking at. So all of the things, the 4, are the Cobra style with this thing on top. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. I have just quick questions here. On that 4-inch tall unit up here, that I believe is 10 inches wide, if I read by 4 feet tall, can that be made any smaller?
That's a standard size antenna, but I'll let Chris answer.
That particular antenna, that's the dimensions of it. So,
Can it be made any smaller? Can you provide one that's any smaller, or you're just saying that's all we are proposing, and it's a 4 foot tall by 10 inch wide?
that particular one, that's the way it is.
Okay.
What about a different size of antenna? I get that
That'd be a
what's missing in the communication is that particular specification of that antenna is 10 inches by 4 feet.
And that's what the client wants.
I think his question is, can you use a different antenna?
There's hundreds of antennas, but NextG's client wants that antenna.
Okay, so I guess
That answers your question.
It helps, yeah, it definitely helps.
You were asking about, can you make that antenna a different size?
Right.
No, you can't, because that's how that antenna comes.
And then should I gather it's the same for the boxes that are attached to the poles? That this is what the client wants to propose, and there's no other options for smaller ones or more streamlined or et cetera, et cetera.
For what? For what?
He's talking about the equipment boxes.
That's that amount to the pole.
Yeah, the equipment boxes are there aren't hundreds of kinds of equipment boxes. Those are much more limited in the types of in sizes that are available.
Okay, so whatever you're proposing, that's it you want us to just talk about that.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're ready to take comments. Keith?
Make some overall comments first and then get into the specifics of these proposals. Personally, I would find it really helpful to understand the entire project if there was some sort of overall matrix that said, here's the different types of installations and here's how many they are and here's where they're going, just so we can get a better grasp on the whole overall program, because it's really kind of difficult just to look at 4 examples in isolation of the entire system. So I would like to see something like that so that we can all get a better understanding of the bigger picture. And also would like to see some simulations and examples of how this system would be applied to the new city standard street lights, the historical ones as well. Again, so we can evaluate the bigger picture of the whole program rather than just little pieces. So that being said, looking at the 4 that we're charged with today, it just seems like 4 feet high by 10 inches is a pretty big chunk. I don't know. It would be nice to see photo simulations too that are from different distances, so that, you know, here's what it looks like right next to it, but here's also what it looks like when you're 100 feet away or 50 feet away in the bigger scheme of things in the streetscape. Because 4 feet or by 10 inches sounds huge, but maybe when you look at it from throughout the street, it'll kind of, you know, disappear into the rest of the scenery. So I guess I find it a little hard to totally evaluate these based on just these exhibits. It seems like obviously that the equipment should be painted, you know, whatever's going to blend into the particular pole, and it sounds like you guys are kind of on top of that as far as whether it's a wood pole or concrete pole, just to try to make them blend in as much as possible. So it seems like that would be the goal to do that. And I guess those are the bigger comments that I have. I find it a little hard to make too many judgments based on what we have before us today. Although I will say that even though this isn't one of the ones we're supposed to be looking at, it seems like the giant Q-tip thing just isn't working for me, and there's the way the pole tapers to the smallest point at the top, which we all know is structurally the efficient thing to do, but then it just accentuates the size of the antenna on the top because you have it at the smallest point of the pole. I think that whole design would need to be rethought before I would be comfortable with it. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to say that the submittal that we have here, for me to review this is almost impossible. I can't read what the dimensions are. I can't look at it. I can't see what the bottom of the antenna is, and how I'm looking at your repeater equipment, and I'm trying to look at your box that you're housing it. The box that's housing it is 4 foot. The repeater is 2 foot. In order for me to do a fair review and say, look, I see areas that this can be reduced, and I need to be able to evaluate that. I can hardly evaluate whether this can be reduced or not, but just glancing at it and trying to squint, there may be areas that it can be reduced. And there may be, looking at the at the antenna. There may be other antennas that are available that are smaller, that are less intrusive. The bottom portion of this antenna I'm looking at, I mean, the antenna itself, the upper portion seems to be that is 18 inches. It's 18.3 inches for the upper antenna portion, and then, you know, we're having another almost 3 feet for the bottom portion of it, the bottom taper portion, and maybe that can be incorporated farther down on the pole, but I can't really evaluate it. So I think I need more information, but the point of my more information is that I think that the size of the equipment that you have on the side of the pole needs to be reduced. I think it's a bit of an eyesore. We're looking at 6 feet on each one of these poles at a 9-foot height, which is a fairly low height. At 50 places on the city, you know, to me that makes an aesthetic impact to the city. So I would like that impact to be as lessened as I think it can be, and I think there may be areas that can be reduced. You know, we have the pill top, the Q-tip top. We have it in 4 locations. You know, if it can be reduced, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. But otherwise, maybe that we can think of some type of adornment that it will be able to incorporate with our existing antennas. I mean, on Milpa Street, we have a big old stalk of corn on top of it, you know, and so maybe that we can work out some type of camouflage on them. And as far as the rest of it, you know, the conduit size, the overhead lines coming through, I think those are all acceptable. And the colorations matching, the wood matching, I think the powder-coated brown and powder-coating because of concrete are also acceptable. But there's...
Okay. Thanks, Gary. Paul?
A couple quick comments. At least I hope I make them quick. We'll go with these. The first thing, when you put together your agreements with the city, the ones that are going to be the cantilevered off 3 feet from the arm, I think someone needs to review that at the city level, at the planning department level, to make sure that the roadway is not considered a vista roadway. And not just blanket, you can stick these things 3 feet out over the public right-of-way and have your antenna and not think about people driving through and the kind of the vista corridor that we have in certain places. Majority of the town, it won't be an issue. But there are a couple of roadways where it will be an issue, and that needs to be reviewed by somebody.
Okay.
If it's within somebody's purview, but I'm just asking that this doesn't get dropped. The problem that I have with this whole application, and it's just probably just me, it's this equipment that's 8 feet off the ground, that's 16 inches wide, and about 4 feet tall, and it seems to be pretty big and it's just obstructive. I just see it as just a big growth, and then the fact that it's 4 inches off the pole is once again visually bothersome because you're used to seeing something and now you're going to see something a little bit differently, and it looks like an appendage and it's very utilitarian, it's very straightforward, but I'm having difficulties with this design. The way it's photographed here, there isn't that little shadow line. The way it's here, what I'd be encouraged to see if there was an opportunity of moving it to the ground, pedestal style, street furniture, whatever you want to call it, take it off the pole. That's just from my perspective. When I look at this mock-up per se, and I see this obstruction, I see it's 4 feet, and to me, I would find an obstruction that's at ground level less bothersome, and that's just from my perspective. Then the Q-tip one, the one that's not within our purview, that everyone's not. This one, I would say, I'd wonder if HLC is going to have a concern about this too. Because when you look at a pole and you see the slenderness and all this kind of stuff, to see this block your view, it's what's wrong with this picture. So that's where I'm having difficulties with this application. So if the next time you come back, it wouldn't be that difficult to build one temporarily on a power pole, have us all take a look at it as an official mock-up kind of per se, or have a video and we get to see you walk around the whole thing instead of just strategically taking pictures from certain views. I think that would be beneficial to us.
Thanks. Clay?
I think my general feeling at the moment is that the installations on the power poles are fine. I drive around the city all day long and I don't look at transformers and other boxes and cable lines. I just don't. After a while, it's wallpaper and you're never going to see it. Having said that, though, I do think that the boxes are rather large, and it sounds like we're in a position where you get the red crayon and that's your choice. You only get the red crayon. There's not really very many options for what to do with that, and it sounds like there's a bunch of legal reasons why they have to be 8 feet off the ground and the size of them and all that stuff. I think that you're on the right track for minimizing the impact of that, however, by matching the colors to the poles and all that stuff. I think that's the right approach. My biggest concern are the ones on the light standards, which seem to be the ones that we're reviewing anyway. I don't feel like that's the right application. I honestly will not support this project if that's the proposal. I don't think it's right. And down the road, it could be in 6 months, and it could be in 6 years, and it could be in 6 generations. I don't know. When we decide to take out these Cobra fixtures and put in the new, as you said, historic, upgraded, oxymoronic light fixtures that the city wants to put in, if we go and do that, that application will not work with those new light fixtures, period. A 4-foot by 10-inch round Q-tip head on top of one of those decorative light fixtures is not going to work, and therefore your system doesn't work, because you'll now have to find a new location or a new application to do that antenna in that location. So I think you need to look for another opportunity to do those antennas and take them off of the Cobra heads. I'm not going to support that. My last comment is I think that I'm requesting staff to make sure that our comments from this meeting go to HLC, and that when it goes to HLC and comes back to ABR that we have their comments, because this is a citywide project and it's being reviewed by 2 completely different boards that have completely different people and completely different concerns. And if it is citywide, it should be reviewed as close to citywide status as we can, so that hopefully we can share our comments back and forth. I think that's all I got.
Thanks, Clay. Chris?
I don't really have much more to add, actually, going at the end again, but I do agree with just about all the comments. So
thanks.
That's about it.
I have a what I'm going to take off where Keith started is that I would like to see a comprehensive thought process to the integration of this type of system into the city, because the city, the constituents of the city for years have fought and voiced over and over and over that they want to have a plan for removing all of these telephone poles and underground all these systems. And here we are adding a system to the poles that will possibly create a longer lifespan or make it harder for these poles to ever get phased out. When I think fiber optics and I think good planning, all the good planning is those fiber optics run underground. And they minimize the impact above ground, and it comes out with as small an aesthetic impact as possible. So, I mean, I feel that there is a profusion of what's called necessary street furniture that's been accumulating over the last few years, over and you know, I take a Meigs and Cliff Drive, where we just have a whole corner of 4, 5, 6 electrical boxes piled up on the corner, and the people can hardly fit on the corner. And we've been trying to phase out these telephone poles for a while because they have been unsightly. And so the aesthetic impact of these boxes on the poles and these nodes that you have at the top, I think I'm very sensitive to that. I'm very sensitive to the size. And the ones that are being proposed right now, I feel that I cannot support. I just think that they're too large. I think that they add too much bulk to the poles. I just cannot see how that's going in a good direction as far as an aesthetic board is concerned. I have no problem with that. I can see that as we move ahead, we have to move ahead technology-wise, and I think that this is okay. The 3 foot out, coming out into the view corridor, I am not happy with that at all. Again, it just reminds me of this is what we have now that we're trying to get rid of, and all we're doing now is just adding more and more on top of the existing poles. And I think that at some point we have to have a plan where we start to modernize and plan these cities properly, and I think we're going in the wrong direction. So I have a problem. So I would like to see a more comprehensive plan. Is how does this fit in with the phasing out of the poles? Can we get a system that is less obtrusive, smaller elements that we could accept within a certain time frame while these things get phased out? I think that these elements on top of the existing poles is, while I think at 4 feet tall and 10 inches wide, I think that they become very odd. And in as much as we're trying to phase out these poles, and again, I think that they're going to become impediment to phasing out these Cobra fixtures once they get up there. I don't think that particular element is going to fit above any of the city-approved standards, light poles. So I don't know how that's going to work, and if to get around that means that you have to then introduce another pole into the landscape that looks like that, it's just a tough place for me to go. So, I mean, I'd like to just see a more comprehensive proposal on why, I mean, how is this heading us forward, at least aesthetically, because that is really our job here. We are charged with that responsibility, and it's just tough for me to accept that on behalf of the citizens out there that have to look at this. So that's where I am. Sorry. So with that, I'd like to open the board to a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll float a motion.
Yep.
That staff go back through the tape and write up the individual comments as just the board's general comments, and that this project return back to the full board with an indefinite continuance, and that staff make the draft comments available for HLC. And there's no need to associate any person's name with the comments. This is just collectively, this is the board's general comments regarding the project.
I'll second that motion.
I'll second that. And under discussion, I'd like to say to the applicants, I think that the goal that you're after, trying to get all these cell phone towers and stuff out of the way and maybe use an existing system so that you don't have too much infrastructure, you're already using a system that's there already. I think that goal is good because you're trying to use an existing system already. It's just that the equipment that you're proposing on top of that is just making the existing system so much worse. And if it were just a lot more sensitive, I think that would be a better direction. So I just want to toss that out there just to let you know that it's a laudable goal, but it's like the elephant, trying to run in to do something that needs a much smaller animal to do. That's all. Okay, so under discussion, any more items? No. We have a first. We have a second. We have first and second. Keith. So all those in favor of the motion as made, say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries. Thank you.
Clarification.
Yes.
The motion is. Sorry, the motion is to have
To return to full board?
return to full board, but is to have staff generate comments from what each one of us said. That's the we're not. In other words, the motion isn't.
We haven't made a motion.
There's no
actually.
real this isn't a standard motion. Yes, you guys.
No,
It's a-
remember this
it's
is
a-
for comments only.
I got it.
So we're making our comments. So when once they give us the ability to make a motion and differently, we probably will. Does that help, or is that good enough? Or
Well, I just want to know what I'm yaying or naying to, because if the applicant is left with come back with the same thing with a little bit more information, I don't want to yay on that.
correct. I see what you're saying.
That's my point of clarification. I want to
I'm. Tell me if I'm right. I get the impression that if staff writes up the comments that we made, the comments the way they were given, they are not particularly a yay to anything. If I'm right, that's not the way that I got it so far. So I'm feeling that there was a fair amount of comment gone back to you in terms of how each member of the board is feeling or how the general board is feeling about the proposal. I think we gave some suggestions as to what we'd like to see when you come in the future, maybe an overall plan as how this thing is integrated. We gave some comments about adverse size of the units.
Okay.
Are you would you like to say any more?
No, I well, part of the motion, I don't know if this is up to the maker and the seconder, but there clearly was some confusion here about what we're reviewing and what we're not reviewing and where's this and where's that. So that's not in the motion to return with that. It's in the discussion and the comments, but does it warrant it being in the motion?
First thing Gary said was blah, 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 and it had to do about the presentation. It's not your fault in the sense that we didn't get the full-size drawings. But there is, what Keith was saying about providing a matrix for more understanding. You now kind of have an understanding of us, of how we dig into these drawings, so the next presentation you bring to us will have more information that we're looking for.
Are we continuing this to another specific date?
We have it as indefinite continuance.
Indefinite continuance. So you can get back on the agenda as soon as staff will.
Could we
Give
set
you
a
a date?
Would it be possible to just set a date now?
You can work with staff on that, yeah. Continue 2 weeks? 2 or 4 weeks.
2 weeks in
We
a
meet
day.
every 2 weeks, so it couldn't be next Monday.
If there's space on the agenda.
Oh, there will be. Only 3 today.
Yeah, true.
Well, next week there'll be 20.
So when is the next hearing?
It'd be on Tuesday after Labor Day. I'm not sure about that day.
We need a cash for light poles. So okay.
Mr. Chair, does the applicant want to come back on a certain date specific?
Yes.
Would you like to come back?
Yeah, we would like to come back on Tuesday the 8th.
So then it's
2
going to
weeks?
be a 2-week continuance.
2 week continuance. Back
Yeah.
to full board.
Is it going to be possible for you to give us options on equipment, or?
We'll come back with what we can propose by then.
Fair enough.
All right. So ready to vote on the measure. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries. Thank you.
Let me just make one other comment. The one thing that I found very interesting is the request for a mock-up. We'll work with staff to see if it'd be possible for us to mock up a couple of these sites. How would it be best to communicate with you where those sites would be? Would that be through
Staff.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be best.
Terrific.
Tell us where
Thanks
to
very
go.
much.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, I'd like to close the ABR meeting for August 24, 2009. Good night, Santa Barbara.